My last video on Taz-Mania for the Mega Drive did really well, by my incredibly low standards at least. It was my first video in quite a while, so I guess either people like Taz or one video every 5 months is about as much as people want from me. Well, I've always been a fan of the scientific method, so today I'm going to put those variables to the test by doing a video on another Taz game, only a week or so after the last. Of course, that means if this video does badly, I'll have to wait 5 months before I do another. Actually, there's a good chance I'll do that anyway, thanks to my massively fluctuating levels of motivation. In any case, I have to give thanks to Nick Porter, who made me aware of the existence of this game in the comments of my last video. So, Escape from Mars starring Taz. It came out a couple of years after the first Mega Drive Taz-Mania game, and until a few days ago I'd never played it. In fact, I'm not sure I'd ever really heard of it. Certainly I had no memories of it, but given how lackluster I found the earlier Taz game, I went into this one with some trepidation. The intro at least is fine. It sets up about as much story as any 16-bit platformer needed. Taz has been kidnapped and taken to Mars by Marvin the Martian. As far as plots go, it's a bit more compelling than the egg hunt of the last game, but ultimately it hardly matters. Then as now, it's gameplay that's important. And once I was actually into the game, it took me less than a minute to realise that Escape from Mars is a very different game to the first, and one with a hell of a lot more promise. It's clear that Taz's whirlwind ability is going to be much more integral to the gameplay, as it's immediately necessary to use it to break down walls and traverse the environment by bouncing back and forth. And then there's the music. I was pretty harsh on the music in the first game. I actually got a comment from Jay Sherman.
It stinks!
Suggesting that the audio atrocities of that game may at least partly be down to emulation issues, but even taking that into account, the music was pretty terrible. In this game, however, the music sounds like this. Ah, fantastic. I managed to select the wrong sound source in OBS when I was recording this level, so all you can hear is me hitting the keyboard and probably the odd bit of muttered profanity. Sorry about that. The next level should be okay. For now, I'll just lay in some music from the first level over the top. Yeah, it's not bad. I wouldn't necessarily say I love it, but it is interesting, and unlike the first game, it does sound like it's been created by someone who has at least heard some music at some point in their lives. The game consists of 6 zones with a couple of levels each, and on the whole this first level is a pretty good introduction to the game. It's fairly non-linear with a few secrets to find, lots of walls to break, and some not too tough enemies to be dispatched. There's even a shrink ray, which makes Taz a good bit tinier and 200% more adorable. Plus, to actually finish the level you have to eat the exit sign, which is a nicely humorous touch. That's our Taz. The next level introduces a few more traditional platforming elements such as moving platforms and pits with spikes. The handling is basically fine, but controlling Taz can feel a bit twitchy, and it takes some practice to feel comfortable with what gaps you can cross and how high you can jump, but there's nothing too taxing. For now. Ominous foreshadowing music. No, I mean really, play some ominous foreshadowing music. Okay, I guess I don't have the budget for that. Fine, you'll have to use your imagination. You're also introduced to the concept of using your whirlwind move in combination with angled walls to be able to climb vertically, which is occasionally necessary to progress. This is a fantastic addition to the gameplay. It's almost on a par with Sonic's spinning, but unfortunately the game never really makes the most of it, and that's not the last time I'll be saying that. The first boss is actually one of the few places where it's really helpful, as it can be used to avoid its tentacle until it's safe to attack. Once you've figured that out, there's not too much of a challenge here. And that is the last time I'll be saying that. Because from here on out, this is a tough game. I usually try to avoid using save states as much as possible in games like this, but I'm going to be upfront here and say that I use them quite a bit in Escape from Mars. And I don't even feel that bad about it, because even with save states, this game gets frustrating as hell. The second zone, Mole World, doesn't start off too badly though. The first level is quite a cool, branching level that encourages exploration without getting too confusing, although I do admit to being slightly baffled the first time I realised you could burrow through the dirt, and ended up basically back at the start of the level. There are some other frustrations. If you miss a somewhat difficult jump near the end of the level, your only option is to burrow your way back to a much earlier point, probably getting hit a couple of times by invulnerable enemies in the dirt. You do have quite a few hit points and there are a good number of health items scattered about, which is nice, but it doesn't take long to realise that, plentiful as they may be, they're never going to be enough. It really doesn't help that it is very easy to accidentally whirlwind into many health items, causing them to go up in a puff of smoke. And just like the last game, it's also very easy to accidentally eat one of the harmful items, such as bombs, or different bombs, or birthday cakes with bombs on them. But yeah, this first level of Mole World is a well-constructed level and a decent challenge. If the game never got harder than this, I'd be happy. You can probably guess what's coming next. The second level of Mole World is a bit of a nightmare. You're on a time limit here as you're being pursued by an unstoppable murderous drilling machine. This isn't exactly a unique setup for a level in a 16-bit platformer, even Sonic did something similar, but this one is particularly brutal. You really can't afford to waste much time, but you also can't afford to be careless, as the path is strewn with spikes, fire, enemies, and more drills. I don't care how skillful you are, you will die here. A lot. Fortunately, there's one thing that makes dying here a bit more tolerable. Well, two things. Firstly, there's an easily accessible extra life near the start of the level, so as long as you at least get that, you won't be losing lives in aggregate. Secondly, there's a continue near the end of the level, so if you make it that far, you have the opportunity to nab this valuable item. As far as I can tell, there's no way to actually grab it and still have time to finish the level, but it does at least give you the option to stock up on continues if you've got the patience, and probably someone better than me could do it without dying. So it's a tough, unforgiving level, but I have to admit it's also quite well constructed, even if the designers were kind of evil. Take this shrinking potion. You might think it's necessary to get through the small gap ahead, but actually you have to ignore it and burrow through the dirt instead, or else you'll be too small to make the next jump, and you really don't have time to wait for the potion to wear off. It's almost sadistic. And oh yeah, thanks to its position, this potion is very easy to drink by accident anyway. It's that sort of game. But on the whole, I probably would have found this level really fun when I was a kid, when I had more patience and more manual dexterity, not to mention better reflexes. Once you make it through that gauntlet, the boss is also kind of sadistic. I figured out how to avoid the missiles, but if there's a way to avoid his chain laser thing, I never managed to find it. I just had to take the hits and hope it died before me. Eventually it did. Okay, Zone 3, Planet X. This place is also pretty tough, although there are no standout bits of sadism here. There's just a lot of stuff that wants to kill you, and plenty of opportunities for it to do so. And there are a couple of pretty cool features here as well. Firstly, the extensive waterfall section, also reminiscent of some Sonic games, where you're continually slipping and sliding through a repeating section of the level, trying to figure out where you're supposed to jump off to actually make progress. It's quite fun, if a little confusing. Then there's the sections where you grab a sort of fungal umbrella, which, in combination with your whirlwind ability, turn you into a sort of marsupial helicopter. That's right, did you know Tasmanian devils are marsupials? I bet you didn't, you ignorant young whippersnappers. Unless you did, in which case, sorry for being patronising. But hey, I'm a doddering old man, it's what I do. Anyway, these sections are pretty fun too, and expand the options for exploration. And I really have to give this game a hell of a lot of credit for its variety and gameplay quirks, which is actually something I complimented the first Taz game on, but here it's even more remarkable. There's a lot of creativity on display here. It almost reminds me of something like Ristar or even Dynamite Headdy, although the different gameplay styles in Escape from Mars are probably not implemented with the same degree of ingenuity. And the graphics are pretty good too, for the most part. The animation on Taz isn't hugely improved over the first game, but the environments sure are. They're bright, colourful, varied and appealing, and really everything looks pretty damn good. Incidentally, I had scanlines turned on when I recorded this, and CMO Jalali, someone whose name I've just mispronounced, suggested in the comments of my last video that this may cause visual issues when watching on a phone, which is something I honestly forget people do, because I'm so old and past it that the idea of watching something on your phone is kind of foreign to me. David Lynch gets it.
You think you've seen a film on your telephone. Get real.
But yeah, if the scanlines are causing you issues, let me know in the comments. The boss of Planet X is this chunky sandworm, and it took me a good few attempts to figure out how to damage it, which kind of demonstrates my level of intelligence because it's pretty damn simple really. All you've got to do is hit the tail with your whirlwind ability, and once you figure out the timing, it's not much of a challenge at all. The next zone is also not much of a challenge, well, not in comparison to what's come before, and especially not in comparison to what's yet to come. It's actually still pretty tough. Taz has made his way back to Earth, specifically Mexico. First up, you've got to navigate your way along a wagon train, being careful to avoid Warner Brothers legends such as Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote and Yosemite Sam. And it's pretty cool to see them make cameos here. Once you get the timing of the jumping down, this section is actually not too tough, as the designers seem to have taken a break from putting deadly obstacles every 2 meters. And it looks good too. This is classic cartoony goodness. The next level, a trek through a Mexican town, is also one of the easier sections of the game. Largely this is due to the fact that there aren't many spike pits or really just traps in general. There are still plenty of dangers around, of course, including Yosemite Sam again, who wanders around shooting randomly, like any good American. He's invulnerable, unfortunately, so you're better off just avoiding him. You're also better off avoiding the boss, which is that bull that made Bugs Bunny regret not taking that left turn at Albuquerque.
In Bernardino. Of course you realize this means war.
The fight is very simple, you just have to jump over him so he slams into the wall, but the timing takes some getting used to. You can't be too quick or too slow, and it seems you need to jump from the right place in exactly the right direction too. It's kind of weird, and I don't think I ever really figured it out, but eventually I lucked into the right timing often enough to be able to progress to Zone 5, Haunted Castle. And oh boy, strap yourself in because this is where things start getting a little nuts. I like the music, a sort of Scottish dirge with a sort of bagpipe drone. But so much else in these levels is pure pain. This section with the tiny ledges that periodically retract into the wall can get frustrating beyond belief. They're so narrow, and the twitchy controls make everything more difficult. It goes without saying that there's a spike pit below them, and flying enemies everywhere, and of course you have to navigate past them twice, first to flip a switch and then to get to the door the switch opened. This almost took my sanity, and I had precious little of that to start with. The second level is slightly less sanity destroying, but it's not exactly smooth sailing either. A lot of the enemies are invulnerable to your whirlwind attack now, and you need the fire or rock throwing power-ups to get rid of them. And by this point I finally understood what the real enemy in this game was, and ironically it's not the enemies. No, it's the way that Taz bounces slightly off everything he touches. If you hit an enemy, you take damage and get bounced back. And that's fair enough, but even if you whirlwind safely into an enemy, you get bounced back. If you hit some walls, you get bounced back. And the game designers seem to have planned it so every time you get bounced back, you will always bounce into something dangerous, be it another enemy, spikes, a bomb, or just off the ledge and back down to an earlier section of the level. I swear, every ledge is just the right length to ensure you're going to fall off it if you get bounced back. Every enemy is at just the right position to knock you into a spike pit. It's infuriating. And even though you do get a moment of invincibility after each hit, it doesn't often last long enough to prevent you getting bounced back into yet another enemy, and then another, and then another. It really gets my blood pressure up, and my doctor says that could be lethal. If I die because of a 16-bit platformer, I'm really going to resent it, although I won't be surprised. And it'll probably be sooner rather than later that I die, because level 3 of the Haunted Castle is the toughest of the bunch. Conveyor belts and acid are the theme here, and sadly you'll probably be spending a lot more time with the acid than the conveyor belts. The platforms are tiny and there are acid spraying contraptions everywhere, plus the whole place is a bit of a maze, one that's very tough to explore because of all the damn acid. The only consolation is the potion that turns Taz into Giant Taz, and allows you to just stomp over enemies. That's pretty gratifying at this point. And the boss is rather cool. You need to jump over him until he gives you a chance to whirlwind into him. Do this enough times and he'll slump into one of the chairs, which have an ominous head-shaped device hovering over them. Go over to the other chair, flip the switch, and now you're the monster. Beat the crap out of the mad scientist lightning machine, swap back your mind to its original owner, or what little mind Taz possessed in the first place, And it's on to the next zone, which is Marvin's house, which is on Mars, which Taz is trying to escape from, which he'd already escaped from, in fact, quite some time ago. Oh well, I guess he wants revenge. Or perhaps, altruistically, he just wants to ensure no one else suffers the same fate he has. Whatever the case may be, this is the last zone. This is what the difficulty curve has been ramping up to. And dear God, is that curve getting steep. Except, well, it flattens out a bit for this first section. It's actually not that bad, and there's even a giant power-up to help you through the toughest bit. Plus there's this genius section where you create a time-lagged copy of Taz. This copy does everything you do, but with a delay of a second or so. It's a genuinely brilliant idea. It opens up the possibility of any number of clever puzzles. I can easily imagine a great Mega Drive game entirely based around this concept. Which makes it a real shame that the game uses it exactly twice and for only 2 rooms containing puzzles so simple they don't really deserve to be called puzzles. Oh well. And so it's time for the very last level, the Nightmare of Nightmares. I hate it, but I kind of love it too. It's a sprawling mess of rooms and lasers, but the real kicker is the changeable gravity. Hit an arrow and the gravity will shift in that direction. It's cool, but it's also massively confusing. Once again, this is something that the Sonic games did on occasion, but never so extensively or with such maddening complexity. The goal of the level, and it took me a while just to realise this, is to deactivate all the lasers by destroying their emitters. Finding these is tough. Getting to them is tougher. Getting back to the newly opened pathway to the exit once you've destroyed them all is even more difficult. Sometimes you have to alter the gravity just so you can get to a place so you can switch it back to another direction and then get back to where you were before, only now you're standing on the ceiling instead of the floor. It hurt my brain, it irritated the hell out of me, and yet I have to concede it's an innovative bit of game design. And eventually, after a lot of messing around and trial and error and rage-induced stress, I disabled all the lasers and made it to the exit. Final boss time. It's pretty tough, but nothing compared to what's come before. It's just a matter of jumping onto the robot's joints and attacking the broom thing on top, which I guess is the source of all Marvin's power. The legs move quickly, the platforms you need to jump on are tiny, and you take more damage per hit from this thing, but it is doable. It goes down, Taz steals the spaceship and heads for home. Okay, as a proud Australian, I am duty bound to point out that this looks nothing like Taz-Mania. I mean, it's kind of the right shape, but not really. Anyway, Taz is home, the credits roll, and I feel a sense of relief that this game is behind me. Which is not to say that this is a bad game. In some ways it's a great game, it's just also very, very frustrating. And I don't say that just as the grumpy, impatient curmudgeon I am now. I'm pretty sure even back in my Mega Drive days I would not have made it through this game. I would have given it a damn good go, and I suspect I would have enjoyed it a hell of a lot, for a while at least. But ultimately I fear it might have defeated me and possibly left a sour taste in my mouth. The thing is though, I do believe that with just a bit of tweaking, Escape from Mars could be an absolute classic of the genre. It's got so much going for it, it tries so many different things and succeeds at most of them. If only the frustration factor was turned down a notch or 2 or 10, it would simply be more fun. All it would take is significantly increasing Taz's hit points and maybe adding some more health items, and removing or at least moving some enemies and traps. Or perhaps Sonic already had the answer with its ring-based health system. If you scattered rings throughout this game and made Taz invincible so long as he had at least one, that could solve a lot of problems. Of course, it might also cause some copyright issues. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification button. And yes, I do feel a bit foolish uttering that old YouTube cliche, but the thing is, for a small channel like mine, it really does make a big difference. Until next time though, get off my lawn.